Welcome to Writers Need Help, the show where we tackle frequently asked writing questions from a variety of perspectives. I'm Kim Ventrella, a traditionally published middle grade author, and I'm here with my three co-hosts. They are now going to say who they are.
I was like, is that the cue?
Cue. Scarlett, go.
I'm Scarlett.
I'm Jenny.
And I'm Alysha.
And as you can tell, this is our first ever podcast. So we're very excited that you could join us. We're talking past to publication today. So one of the things that made us want to start the show is that I know I personally have been listening to a lot of podcasts, and it's usually either all traditionally published people writing for one particular audience or all self-published people writing for another audience. And so I wanted a show that represented a variety. So we have traditionally published people writing for middle grade, YA, adult, and indie published people, and we're going to give you perspectives on kind of the whole thing. So first of all, we're going to talk about our first steps, like how did we get into writing and publishing, and how did we decide initially between traditional or self-publishing. So I'm going to send it over first to Scarlett for your first steps.
This feels like a very long road. So my first steps I started writing when I was 13, and I just started writing with all my experience was reading. And then in high school, I connected with my high school English teacher, and we actually started a creative writing class, and she encouraged me to submit to publishers early. So my first experience with rejection was when I was really young, and but I kept doing that throughout college, submitting on books I had written that probably were not ready. And after college is when I sort of got into like the conference sphere, and I was entering pages for critique and learning from different agents and authors and publishers. And I still felt like I really wasn't getting anywhere. And so I kind of entered the online writing world, and that introduced me to a whole level of other authors and what they were doing and self-publishing. And self-publishing started to look more and more enticing because I found that I was not happy with rejection. And I just really felt like I could do this. And at the end of the day, I really had to consider what was going to make me happy because I loved writing so much. It was my escape for so long. And so I took the plunge and I self-published. And I failed miserably with my first two books, and decided I was going to write a whole new book and submit that to agents and publishers. And I failed miserably with that. And so I was like, I'm going to self-publish it. And eventually it led to success. But it took a really, really long time. So that was sort of my first steps.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, we'll spend a lot of time getting to that eventually. But also, Scarlett, can you tell us like what those years were? Because I know in listening to a lot of the self-publishing podcasts, like it's kind of new, but there are those pioneers that started out in like 2010 and 2011, but your experience is more recent, right?
I started self-publishing in 2014, and so 2014 and 2015, I released a book a year, and then I did not self-publish again until 2018. But the book that really hit was in 2019. So
I love it, and we'll dive into more of that, of course. But I'm going to turn it over to Jenny for your first steps.
Well, my first steps were kind of an accident. I never planned to be a writer. I didn't set out to be a writer. I always did theater. I come from a family of writers, and they were all writers. So that's probably why I didn't want to be a writer. Even though I'd always written and I always enjoyed it. And, I'd always had people say, oh, you're really good at this. But it was never my first love. But then I moved back to Tulsa where my family is. And my mom was very active in SCBWI. And I didn't know a lot of people, you know, I was just kind of in town. She was like, you should come to some meetings and at least you'll meet some people and maybe you'll write something. So I did. And I wrote a book and I found out I really enjoyed writing. It turns out that it has a lot in common with theater that I hadn't really thought about before. So once I actually, you know, got over being stubborn and refusing to do it, I found out I really enjoyed it. And I went with traditional publishing just because that's the world that I knew. That's what I was familiar with. Like I said, my mom was a writer. I grew up sort of knowing that world and knowing how it worked. And unlike most people, like to me, having grown up in that world, like self-publishing seemed way more complicated. So I was like, I don't even want to get involved with that. That's complicated. So I just decided to try to do it the traditional route.
I love it. Yep. And you are this amazing family of authors, which is very cool because you have a brother that's like a poet laureate or something.
Yeah,
right?
my brother, that's a lot to live down. Yeah, my brother was the poet laureate for the state of Oklahoma, which is really when I decided to get serious. I was like, listen, I cannot let my little brother be the only one that's like doing something. I've got to compete. So yeah, that's what sibling rivalry is really. It comes down to sibling rivalry.
I love it. Yeah. So if you're out there, that can be your sole motivator, just like
Right.
one-upping your sibling.
Even now, as an adult, it still works.
And so for listeners who may not be familiar, STBWI is a Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So it's a great group for anyone from picture books through young adult who's interested in learning more about writing. There are chapters all over the country. So definitely look into that. I was a part of that as well and still continue to do events and whatnot with them. But let's head over to co-host number 3, Alysha. Go.
So my first steps, I've always been writing. The earliest things I can remember writing was fan fiction for the Mary-Kate and Ashley cartoon series. I wrote like episodes and then I wrote like a fan fiction Clueless in 5th grade where I inserted all of my friends and myself. But now I look back, I'm like, I didn't know what that movie was about in 5th grade. I thought it was just about being popular and like driving a car. But yeah, I didn't know that being an author was like a career. I thought it was something, I don't know, people did when they were retired. So I went through college and then had like a quarter life crisis before I was even quarter life. And found that I was only really happy when I was reading books. And I was like, well, what if I write a book? Like not fan fiction, but like a real book. And so in 2012, I participated in NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, which you're supposed to like write a whole book in 30 days, like 50,000 words in 30 days. And I told myself, like, if I can do it, then I'll pursue this as a career. And I did it. So I have been pursuing this like wholeheartedly since November 2012. And yeah, the traditional route just kind of seemed like the only route, I think, for the longest time, because I was writing books for kids, so mostly young adult. And the books I was reading were at Barnes & Noble and those kinds of stores. So for the longest time, yeah, I only knew of traditional publishing. And then when I saw self-publishing, like Jenny said, it sounds so complicated and also really stressful that you have to do everything on your own. And I was like, well, I need help. But now that I know Scarlett, I'm like, I don't know, maybe self-pub.
Yeah, I love you always have to weigh those options. I think that's part of what we're hoping to do on this show is to kind of have all of those stories and those options represented. But as for me, it's kind of that quarter life crisis thing that you said really rings true because I remember graduating college and, prior to that, I loved writing. I would have like kids and teachers telling me like, you're going to grow up and write mysteries or horror, because I would write creepy things in people's yearbooks and things like that. And all the kids would line up so I could write this really creepy, thing in their yearbook. But I never considered it a viable career path, because I just thought artists and creatives don't make money. And looking back, that's one thing I wish I could go back and change and be like, if you have the determination and you put in the work, yes, you can do this for your career. And the earlier you start, the better. But it wasn't until I graduated with a degree in French and had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, because that wasn't my passion, that I considered writing. And it was a very slow path of like on and off. Like I'd be super into it. Some of the first things I started writing were adult stories for literary journals and things. And I would get these responses, like I would send to these kind of horror, like goth magazines. They'd be like, this is too dark. We would never publish this. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? So I tried all kinds of things. I got into reading a lot of YA. So I tried to write in the YA market. I ended up becoming a librarian. So I switched. I was in a master's program for French, and I switched it to a master's program in library and information studies, because I went to a conference where these librarians talked about selling their book while they were working the library. And I was like, I could do that too. So I switched. And eventually, after 7 or 8 years of working in libraries, it happened. But like I said, because I was a librarian for young adults and then eventually children, I was reading by the end mostly middle grade books. And so it just so happened that that's what I started writing. And I found that I did have this voice for middle grade, even though it wasn't ever what I thought I would be writing. I thought I would be writing adult speculative fiction. But I ended up in 2015 getting an agent after a summer of just being like, this is happening right now. Because I was at a job I didn't like. And I had just moved back home to Oklahoma, and I was not happy about it. It was just a purely financial decision. So I was at a real low point, and I wrote like 5 or 6 complete manuscripts back to back. And then the last one of those got me interest with an agent. It was actually the first one I ever submitted, because it was the only one I thought was good enough, maybe. And then it was the next one I wrote immediately after that sold. And that was in 2015 when I got the agent and sold it, like fall 2015. It came out fall of 2017. And so I now have 4 traditionally published middle grade novels that are currently out. But I'm always interested in pursuing other audiences and other types of publishing as well. So we're going to be talking about a lot of that on the podcast. But so we always talk about kind of like that path to get there, and how many trunk novels or novels that nobody will ever see that we have. So let's kind of talk about that. Like, how many manuscripts did you write or even start before you started subbing or before you pub, right? Scarlett, let's go to you.
This is a harder question for me, because there are very few things I don't publish when I finish them. Probably prior to publishing, self-publishing my first go around, I had just kept rewriting the same book for years. And that was the case as well with When Stars Come Out, which I had been writing since high school. I have how many books do I have out? 3, 4, 5, 6 books? 6 books. I think I have 6 books published. 2 under a different name. And so I just kept rewriting until I was absolutely sick of all of those novels. And now, because, A Touch of Darkness, the novel I published in 2019, has done so well, everything I write and my whole publishing schedule is very intentional. So everything that it's very tight. For instance, Malice is the book that's coming out in May. It has probably gone through 3 kind of edits. So it will have very loose structure, and then I'll go back through and flesh it out. And then the 3rd edit's always for adding emotion and more details. And then the final is right before publication. And it's very hard. It's a very hard thing to stick to. And I always think I'm going to finish a novel early. Like I always think, oh, you'll finish this novel a month early Never. I never do. I always finish it about 2 weeks before it's ready to go live, and it is not for the weak. So you do not have to publish like I do, but because I have such a demand now, I feel pressure to get that book out as quickly as possible. Even though my readers would be very understanding, it would be very hard for me to not meet the deadline I set for myself. Something I'm working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I've been thinking about this a lot, kind of the difference between, because I think when you're listening to self-published authors, it tends to be people talking about that very deliberate schedule. Like, I've written this and it comes out at this time, and you rarely hear like, I wrote this entire book and I decided it wasn't going to work. And then I did this other book and that one is just kind of gone. And do you think that has to do with the fact that you are essentially empowered throughout the whole process? So you're not necessarily feeling like you're having to write to other people's expectations. And maybe a lot of the times when me, for example, a lot of the times when I go through the process of doing a novel and like it's not going to work, it's because, well, it's not going to work with this agent or this editor with this market, right? Because I don't have the final say so on whether or not it's going to work, and I kind of will sort of center myself and be like, yeah, this is this is just done. Do you think that has something to that plays into it with the way that self-publishing authors tend to be able to keep to this very rigorous schedule?
Yeah, well, I think that's a big part of it because I was told by traditional publishing that my novel doesn't work. But you have to give something a chance. We basically take a chance on everything we publish. We don't know if it's going to be a success. So when I published When Stars Come Out, which is a YA, I was not sure that anyone would be interested in it, but I felt like I had to. That was my entry novel. This was like me starting sort of a new path for myself. And then I just quickly jumped into writing A Touch of Darkness. Now, that novel I really felt was going to be something because I was writing. I feel like we might be getting into this a little bit later, but it's a Hades and Persephone retelling. So I knew there was a niche audience for that. So at least I could tap into that, right? So yeah, you don't have those kinds of expectations of the industry, right? And I know other authors. I'm lucky. I think I have a very unique situation where my audience will buy anything I write now. I am going to release a vampire novel, right? And they're really excited about it. And I remember announcing that and thinking, I've made it. Like, these people will buy things with my name on it. They will one click my name, right? But I know other authors who, for instance, they play with their titles on Amazon and they take stuff down that's not selling very well, or the things that sell really well, like one author, her contemporary sells really well, and what she's really honing in on is like this age gap romance, and it's doing really well. So she's writing more of those books. So some authors really just keep going and do what works. I hope that helps.
No, yeah, that's really interesting. And sometimes I think with self-publishing, it's more of you can play with it in the public space. Whereas with traditionally published, those novels that maybe don't work in quotation marks, they're just never seen in the public, right? And so it's just a very different dynamic. But Jenny, what would you say in terms of like how many manuscripts and things and edits did it take before you kind of got your debut that's about to come out in August of 2021?
Well, the novel that's coming out in August is Dark and Shallow Lies. It was the third completed manuscript that I wrote. So it was number 3. I wrote a first one that I still really like. And it's, in fact, I'm revising it right now, and it will probably, at least I hope, be the book 2 in my 2-book contract. So I am coming back to it. I didn't totally abandon it, that first one. But I've learned a lot since then. And of course, it had to be rewritten and overhauled, and really it's only sort of the skeleton of the idea of that book that it's going to be book 2. So there's that one, and then I have a second one that I wrote in between, which I also really like, and had a whole bunch of positive feedback on, and I think eventually I'll probably go back to that one as well. So I guess the answer is 3. There were 3 of those. Like I said, I didn't mean to write to start with, so I don't have like, I don't have like a drawer full of unfinished novels or half finished novels or novels that are finished and never to be seen again. Because I haven't been doing this that long.
Oh, I could show you my drawer. There's probably like monsters coming out of that drawer. Alysha, what would you say? How many did you go through before you landed your agent?
So I got my agent on book number 6. And while I was querying, I wrote a book number 7. And then before going out on submission to editors, the agent that signed me in January of 2020, was it 2020? God, it's only, okay, yeah, a year. We decided to change it from young adult to middle grade. So I did a revision, like as I just opened up a new document and started writing from there. So I count that as a book 8, even though the same characters are in it, but literally everything else changed. Like the setting and the characters are the same because it's historical fantasy. So like I didn't change those things, but everything else changed. So I consider it a book number 8. And that's the one that is out with editors currently. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed for that one. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I've gone through so many and I've started so many, and I'm a person who changes a lot. So I am not someone who would look back at my old novels and ever, ever, ever want them to be seen by anyone or myself. If I could go back in time and set them on fire, I would set them on fire because I feel like I'm constantly learning, and none of that changed after the publication of my first book or my second book or my third or my fourth book. I mean, I'm still constantly learning and growing, and I don't like to look back at things, and that's just kind of my personality. I'm similar to Alysha, so maybe different in the fact that I didn't submit any of my early drafts. They were just kind of me writing in secret because I just knew, like in my gut, they were not what I wanted to be presenting. They were just me learning how to write, and that was just how I went about it. So yeah, I definitely did probably 6 or 7, I don't even remember, like completed ones before I got to the one that I finally sold. So it was definitely kind of a long process. And I realized that I didn't answer the question before about why I chose traditional publishing over self-publishing. So I'll circle back to that. But for me, just because the thing that I ended up finding success with was middle grade, I don't think that it would be, I've heard of people who are able to find success self-publishing middle grade, but I think it's a huge rarity. And for me, the vast majority of my sales, my readers, they are in schools. So you are marketing to gatekeepers, librarians, teachers, or parents, and you're trying to reach kids in schools. And it is very difficult to sell a self-published novel, middle grade novel, to kids in schools. So for me, I just think it would be a difficult path, but I'm certainly interested in, pursuing it maybe for adults or something like that in the future. But yes, it can be a long road. And so we're going to actually kind of dive into that question again of traditional versus self-publishing. And so if you had a friend, let's say, who had just finished a manuscript and you were going to advise them based on your experience, like, do you think they should go with traditional or do you think they should go with self-publishing? I guess what would be your advice? But also, what questions would you ask them? Because for me, I would have a lot of questions first. And Scarlett, we'll start with you on this one.
This is really hard because I actually get this question a lot. And I obviously would first want to know what they're writing because again, I was a librarian as well, and I know that certain genres are not going to do well being self-published. You can get away with YA, but I don't know. You can, and also is the book is your is the concept of your book rooted in something that is familiar? Because if you've written something that is too unique, your audience will not be able to connect with it. And no matter what you're publishing, I think traditional or self-published, you need to ensure that people can connect with your characters. Yeah, I mean, when I think about what I love about self-publishing is that I have control. So, are you going to be okay if an editor says we need to take out pieces of your book? How much control do you want over your cover? You can put that in your contract as a traditionally published author, but you get to work one-on-one with your cover designer as a self-published author. I would also say, how quickly do you want your book out there in the world? Because traditional publishing is very slow. A lot of times, with the exception of Jenny, because she's a badass. You have to wait 2 years before your book comes out in the traditional realm. For me, I have instant gratification. That's not always a good thing. Look how tight my publishing schedule is. Yeah, stream of consciousness. Those are the things that roll off the top of my head.
Okay, I love it. And of course, Jenny, so you've only kind of gone this one route, but what would you say? Do you have any advice that you might offer?
No, I would say, the main question is what are the goals for what you have in mind? I mean, is it more important to you to get it out there, or, what do you want? Do you really want to walk into Barnes and Noble and see your name on a book? Because most of the time, not all the time, obviously, but most of the time, Scarlett is up there being like, but me, and she's right. But most of the time, that doesn't happen for self-published people. So, I think it just depends. For me personally, one of the reasons I went the traditional route is because I wanted someone to pay me. And most of the self-published people I knew up to that point did not make very much money doing what they do. I did not know Scarlett at that point, obviously. I have since realized that some people make a lot of money, but not most of them. So I would say, what is it? What's more important to you? What are you looking for? What do you want to get out of it?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And too, it's the difference in how you get paid, because I will say it was important for me to have that money up front and to know, here, I have this bulk amount of money and now I can use this. And this is, I can live off of this for a couple years or something. Whereas if you're self-publishing, you go out to it the very first time, you could just hear crickets, right? And you don't know. So until you've established yourself, there's a difference in what you can expect. With traditional, once you get that offer, you know exactly how much you're going to get up front. With self-publishing, until it takes off, you have no idea how much you're going to make. So that's another question. And I think that's another maybe thing to think about with going hybrid and doing a little bit of both as well. But Alysha, you're a little early in this game, but do you have any advice or thoughts?
I agree with everything you all said. If someone asked me for advice between the two, I would probably honestly tell them I can give advice on why I've chosen to try traditional for now, especially with the age group or age range that I'm writing for. And if they want to know more about self-pub, I would be follow my friend Scarlett and ask her questions on her Instagram. Because I haven't, but all the questions everyone brought up of what are you wanting out of it? Are you wanting money up front? Are you wanting more control? Are you wanting the book out more than you want to do school visits? It's really dependent on age and genre. And I think hybrid is a really fascinating idea. I'm definitely toying that. I'm still super early, like in the game, so I have so many options before me. So I'm trying the traditional route first, and then I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are early too, so they're kind of in that same boat, and maybe they're trying to decide between the two. So it's a good conversation to have. For me, I would love to get into hybrid. I'm totally traditional now, and largely that's because of what I write middle grade. But I would love to dive into writing other things like adult speculative fiction. And definitely, for me, a big consideration would be having multiple revenue streams. No matter what I do, I don't want to be dependent on one thing. So in traditional publishing, yes, you can diversify and be like, I'm going to write for a different audience. But at a certain point, it's all the same thing because you're going through the same agent and you're going through, it's a very similar thing. And I think I would like to have money coming from different sources, and doing both self-publishing and traditional would be a huge bonus for me. I'm also someone who writes very fast, and traditional publishing cannot keep up with that. So it can be really frustrating for me at times. But I don't think I'll ever move totally away from traditional because I tend to write more literary novels in general, and I don't think those would work very well with self-publishing. And I also tend to write stuff that is very kind of, let's say, niche and weird. And so I'm not sure that it's going to have a broad market appeal necessarily with self-publishing. And I think sometimes that type of stuff, it's actually could be easier to go with traditional. But yeah, I would definitely love to do both. And that would be kind of my sweet spot for that in the future. But so talking about, like, regardless of how you end up publishing, a lot of people have the question about kind of author platform marketing, promotion, and we have people who are in all different stages. And I know, Jenny, this is probably a question that you have right now as you lead up to your debut, which is like, what is expected of you in this pre-publication state? So maybe you are like Alysha and you have an agent, but you don't have that first book deal yet. Or you're like Jenny and like your first book is coming out really soon. So it's like, what should you be doing? So I'll throw it to Scarlett, like in terms of promotion pre-release, like pre your big release. Did you find that you did a lot and you found a lot of success with it before the book came out, or did most of your success with promotion come after the book had already picked up a little steam?
It feels like a pretty gradual thing. So quarantine actually is the beginning of quarantine is when my book really started to take off. It was about a month into it was probably gosh, I'm trying to think. May, after A Touch of Ruin, my second novel had been released. I kind of had like this influx of people, and around that point, I remember talking to you, Kim. We did a marketing. We talked about marketing, and at that point, I had about 600 followers. And now, a year later, I'm at 10K. I'm almost at 10K. So I feel though that this was readers, and one of the things my readers will always say about me is that I am very interactive with them and very genuine, and I think that helped also build my audience, and it encouraged people to reach out to me, and it encourages people to talk about you, which is very interesting. And so I get a lot of people who send me screenshots of them talking about how cool I am, which is both cool and, well, really cool. But something I've always done, a huge part of what I've always done as an author, even when I was a failure, learning, I shouldn't say failing, I was learning, is I always had a marketing plan. And I knew going into this round, what I wanted to do is build a following of readers, because prior I built a following of writers, and writers will follow you, some of them, because you're a writer and not because you're an author, and they won't read your work. They'll promote it, but they won't really read it. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to attract readers. And so I can't really tell you. It was using a lot of the same hashtags and creating an aesthetic, and then interacting with people, and then you get those hardcore fans, and then they promote you to other people. But you don't have to be on the platform where you're doing really well. For instance, I am like viral on TikTok, but I just started my TikTok. Um, when I first began, people would find my book on Pinterest because I knew Pinterest was a good platform for the kind of work I did. And now it's migrated to TikTok. You just want to, pick one that you really like and talk to people, I think. I don't know if that's helpful. I feel like maybe it's helpful if you're an extrovert like me.
No, I love that. And actually, I've been listening to, like I mentioned, a lot of podcasts on self-publishing. And I think there are, especially a lot of the people who've broken out recently tend to have a similar journey in the way that they've developed their readership and whatnot. But talking about kind of that, it's mostly writers that are following you. And I found that especially early on with Twitter, it tends to be mostly like authors supporting each other on there. There are also great things about that though, because you can find your network. And I know I found, I started a website with, now we have about 20 of us that are all working on spookymiddlegrade.com. And one of the fun things we've been doing for a couple of years now is we do free author visits with schools across the country all year round, and it's so fun. There's 4 of us on each call, and it's like this live Q&A with students. So just getting to know that network of people has been so rewarding. Like we are, we'll get on calls and we'll talk for like 6 hours. I mean, this is like it's become a really amazing network, just for me personally, and then also doing like different marketing activities. So I think that can be something that is useful, as well as connecting with readers, especially when you're starting out, because starting out, those are going to be the only people you can really reach out to because you don't have readers yet. It's going to be harder to connect with them before your first book is out. And for me also, of course, it's about connecting with teachers, because as someone who writes for middle graders, it's really, you're not going to have the same direct relationship with readers on social media because generally they don't qualify to create accounts, and that's kind of weird. And you're just going to be, it's going to be the educators and the librarians that you have and that you're connecting with. But so Jenny, you're in this unique place where your big debut is just about to come out. So how are you feeling in terms of marketing and promotion?
Lost would be the main word that I would use. Totally lost. I'm sort of like feeling my way through it. I will say, like, a question that I see asked so much, like particularly at conferences and things, so many people want to know, do I have to have a big social media platform? Do I have to have a lot of followers before I can get an agent and sell a book? Let me tell you, the answer to that is no. I got a really good book deal. I had like 4.5 followers on Instagram, like my aunt and like a kid I went to school with, like, and that was pretty much it. Like my sister, I think, not my brother. But now I've got like 300. So I'm up by like 294, like, which is really good. So I'm making progress. But I was really worried, I guess, at first because I didn't have any. They didn't seem to care. And so here I am anyway. But now that things are starting to happen, like the cover reveal happened recently and things like that. So, every time I go back and check, I'm like, oh my God, I have more than I had before. So now I feel like I'm kind of starting to relax a little bit, and I can sort of figure out, Kim and Scarlett and Alysha will tell you, I ask a lot of questions. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. What do I need to do? So it is very overwhelming, but I'm kind of less panicky than I was like a month ago, maybe.
Yes, you're doing it. And as I've been telling Jenny, her publisher is actually doing a really big push for the book, which is kind of rare. So it's exciting to see that happening, and it's going to be really fun as it goes through the release. But that's very cool to see. And Alysha, you are like a little bit earlier days. So how are you feeling in terms of the promotion? And I know that you also have this cool connection to one of our my favorite indie bookstore, Best of Books. So do you feel like the stuff you've been doing with them has been kind of helping?
Yeah, so I'm in that position where I'm basically just on Instagram. I have a Twitter and I have a ton of followers. Well, a ton. Like it's under 1,000, but it's still more than my Instagram, which I've been trying to like grow for years. But it's mostly all writers. I'm finding my way into the community and into different groups of writers on Instagram right now. So that's fun. Through that, I've found like a couple on submission groups where people on submission to editors can like vent or cry or hug each other virtually while we get rejections and wait for the one editor to offer a nice deal on our book, which is nice. You need the support during that time. So, and I like being supportive to others and get feedback on like, is my path, like what's happening to me, is it normal? It seems to be normal, but I wouldn't know that without the community all like telling me what they're going through and what they have been through. So that's really nice. It's like having a bunch of mentors, like hundreds of mentors around me constantly. And yeah, my work with Best of Books has definitely helped. It's connected me to so many authors. And I think doing all these virtual events with them over the last year, they like remember my name. So when I follow them on Instagram with like my personal account, they're like, oh, I know her. And so they'll follow me back. And they've all been so nice. I don't typically tell them like during their event that I'm also a writer because it's their event. And I'm just the moderator and host. And so later I'll get like DMs or something or an email and they're like, why didn't you say you were a writer? Like, are you on submission? Like everyone is so nice. Everyone's so helpful. And at least the ones I've met so far have been really supportive and told me to ask any questions I wanted. So just because your followers are only writers doesn't mean like they're not nice. But yeah, I am worried about like how do you gain a reader? I have nothing for people to read. Like I have stuff, but it's not out there.
Absolutely. Well, you will have stuff that is out there. And I know that like reader magnets are something that a lot of self-published authors will love to put out there. So maybe this kind of ancillary material like short stories or novellas or sample chapters or things that they'll put out to get people to draw people into a series that they're getting ready to release or something like that. So maybe putting something like that out there might be fun. But so we are focusing on our paths to publication today. And so Alysha talked a little bit about the work that she does with Best of Books, our local indie scheduling virtual events and whatnot with authors. So that's very cool. But we all essentially are doing this full time, which is pretty rare. So I wanted us to talk about kind of what led up to us being able to do our writing full time, which a lot of people are interested in doing. So I'm going to head over to Scarlett.
I cannot tell you. I just started making a lot of money, and then I was like, I can do this full time. This comes from this something happened. I don't know what happened. I used to make nothing on my books, my previous books. So I have to be very clear that I have had, when I say that I didn't do well at this before, I am not lying. I made nothing on previous books. And then even when Stars come out, like the only reason when Stars come out sells now is because people read A Touch of Darkness. Touch of Darkness is my moneymaker. Last year, it sold 44,000 copies the whole year. And just in January and February, it sold 33,000 copies. So that kind of gives you an idea of how crazy my life is. But what happened, I guess, I think it might be, I don't really know. I just never stopped promoting my book. I don't give my book away for free. A lot of self-published authors will do this thing where they give out ARCs to just like basically anyone who will ask in exchange for a review. I don't do that. I didn't have a street team earlier on. I have a street team now. But I published A Touch of Darkness, and then a year later I published A Touch of Ruin. And then quarantine happened, which I kind of attribute some of it to quarantine because people were at home a lot and they were reading more, I think, but I could be wrong. But that was about April's A Touch of Ruin, and I was probably making about $8,000 a month at that point. I'm going to use real numbers because that's the only way I know how to do this. And then the next month it was like $10,000, and I was like, I make $4,000 as a librarian a month, and I'm making $10,000 now. Let's see what next month brings. And then it was like another $10,000 month, and I was like, I think I can do this full time if this is the direction it goes. And then it was like $13,000. I was like, I can do this full time, and so I did. And I think I took a bit of a risk because as self publishers, our income is very it's not stable, but luckily mine just keeps going up. So it's never gone back down. And now I make more, way more in a month than I did in a year. So I have a very unique situation, I think. But yeah, that is what led to me. I feel like I am not helpful at all. Like, because I didn't save money to do this. I just started making a lot of money. And then I was like, whoop, I can write full time.
Well, I think a lot of people will be interested to hear, though, that your first couple books didn't take off, and that often is the case. And so that will kind of give people hope. And it is interesting to me because for those people who listen to a lot of these podcasts about self-publishing, your story is really unique because often you hear about people putting out a lot more books a year, and that's kind of how they build that income on their backlist. And just like there are a lot of different strategies that people have used, and it seems like you really hit the zeitgeist, like right in the perfect moment, and this just kind of took off. But it's going to be interesting to hear too, like going forward as we get more into like the different strategies that you've used, and we delve into that in future episodes and stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to get into that. But Jenny, what would your story be about writing full time?
Well, I'm going to tell you, this is the key. Okay. This is the absolute, actual, honest to goodness key to writing full time. That is, never have another job to start with. I didn't have one, so I didn't have one to quit. So it was very easy. Actually, I teach theater classes, and we've been, I have my own business. I teach privately, but there was a pandemic going on, and we work with primarily schools and things. And so that was all shut down. And so I was like, well, I'm going to have to make some money. So I'm going to have to really get out this book, and I'm going to have to polish it up, and I'm going to have to get an agent. It's either that or I'm going to be like eating cat food and living in a box. And I did not want to do that. So it is amazing what you can accomplish when you have no other choice. That is and literally I've taught and directed theater for like years. And I used to tell my theater students, like, listen, if you really want to do theater, don't have a backup plan. That's what you need to know. Like if you go and you think, I really want to do theater, but I'm going to major in accounting, so I'll have a backup plan, you will end up being an accountant. It's much easier. So I would tell the same thing to writers. The best way to ensure you can quit your job is to not have one in the first place. And then eventually you'll get desperate enough that you will really do what you've been saying you're going to do all these years and write a book. I was lucky enough to get a really just insanely ridiculous advance, which was more than I had expected I would get. It was not what I thought I was going to get going into it, and that was great. And it's taken obviously a lot of like that financial pressure off, which I think is a huge thing for not just writers, but artists in general, who always kind of try to find that balance between I really love art, but I also really love food. I don't know that. I mean, I'm serious. The only advice I have is just, if you have to do it, you have to do it.
Oh yeah, I think that's great advice. That's like me. I wish I would have taken the plunge earlier. And Alysha, what would you say? You're in kind of a unique position.
Yeah,
But tell us
because I
your
haven't
story.
sold anything. So in late 2019, very end of it, I saw that our local indie Best of Books had posted like this job opportunity for an event coordinator that was very part time. Like it wasn't even part time, like quarter time. Um, and I was at a full time job, and I was the moneymaker in our household. But I have a very supportive husband, and we decided to jump in. And because I was very unhappy where I was, and he was like, "Yeah, do it, and then write books when you're not doing bookstore stuff," which is what I've been doing now for almost a year and a half without having sold a book. And it's nothing short of a miracle, honestly, that we can pay every single one of our bills every single month. But it's been happening. So like, not to get to like too spiritual, but my partner and I are pretty spiritual, so we believe in like this is the path, like we're on it, and that's why things are working out. So still hoping, fingers crossed every single day that I'm going to get that call for a really great deal like Ginny got. Or if someone was to pay me $10,000 a month for what I'm working on, like I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and I feel like I'm definitely so what Ginny says is it rings so true. You just have no other alternative. And I was a little bit lucky up front. So because my first middle grade book was sold in a 2-book deal, and it was a much smaller 6-figure deal than Jenny's, but it was life changing for me at the moment. But I still didn't quit my job right away. What I did was not spend any of that money. And I am a type of person, I am a super budgeter. I was in the Peace Corps, and I love that we had $200, like the equivalent of $200 a month, and you just make it work. And when I was a little kid, I said I wanted to grow up and be a starving artist. And I literally meant it, because I'm just happiest when I can have the simplest like existence. If I have stuff, I will get rid of it. Like I am the opposite of a hoarder. I just don't like to have superfluous stuff. And so I felt that being self-employed would be absolutely perfect for me, but it was really hard for me to take that plunge just because, well, you never know what's going to happen. And healthcare was always a big question. But it just got to the point about 2 years after I had sold my book, and I could already tell that it was not going to meet the publisher's expectations, which is the case with about, probably 90% of the books that they put a huge like investment in. They don't necessarily pay off. They're just gambling. Like they hope this thing is going to take off. So it did not meet their expectations, and I knew that. And I was like, you know what? It's time, because I was unhappy at my job at that moment and had been for a while. And I was like, this is my main goal in life. I don't care about money. All I want is to be doing my passion full time, which is something that people in the vast majority of countries across the world, including this country, never ever get the opportunity to pursue or to even figure out what their passion is, because they're just surviving, right? And like if I had the opportunity to do it, even if it was for a limited amount of time, I was like, I'm just gonna do it. And so, you know, so I've sold a couple more books for vastly less than I sold the first 2 for, but I'm still making it work, and I am a super budgeter, and I just cut out like every single expense. And I have every time I make money, I never spend that money, because I have like, here's what I'm going to spend for this year and the next year and the next year. And if I make new money, it goes in the end of this year, and I will never spend it for several years, because that is just how I budget, right? So frankly, that is how I have made it work, by being a super budgeter. And it's absolutely my bliss is to live the simplest life and just do exactly what I want all the time. And I don't know how long I'll be able to make it work. I'm at the point now where I'm starting to look at some side hustles, because traditional can be very, very difficult. It doesn't necessarily matter how many manuscripts. You're right. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to sell them on a timeline that works for you. And so that's why I'm now considering going hybrid at some point, because I am a quick writer, and I think it would be really useful for me. But anyway, we're going to kind of close it out by talking about one mistake that we have made that we want to kind of share what we have learned from it, especially when it comes to like our path to publication and that whole road that we took. I'm sure there are many of them, but if you can pick out one mistake that you made, and I see Scarlett's giving me a face, so maybe I'll go to Jenny first and we'll get her mistake. She's like, don't do it. Yes, I'm going to go to Jenny first. One mistake, and what have you learned from it?
Okay, well, this is going to sound really bad, but I don't have a mistake. That's not because I don't make mistakes. It's just because I haven't been doing this literally long enough to make a mistake yet. I've been like a pre-published author for like a hot second. So I'm sure that if you come back around to the same question like next year, I will have something really deep and worthwhile to add. But right now, I don't know. I got an agent that I'm really, really happy with. I really like everything so far. Has been, if I was like a superstitious person, I would like knock on wood or something. But I'm sure that I will make plenty, but I can't think of anything yet. Give me a while, though. Come back to me.
I'm still muted, so that's really good. I'll definitely, there's my mistake, not unmuting yourself. We'll be coming back around to Jenny. Scarlett, have you had time to think about it's a hard one. We don't want to think about our mistakes, right? But I think people do want to learn from them.
Yes, it might take me a little bit to find the words, but I know what I'm trying to say. I put so much, I just put so much, not faith, but I had this huge belief that traditional publishing, and so many of us do, but traditional publishing is absolutely the way. And if they do not say I am a great author, then I am a horrible author. And I just had this really strict belief system about, that being how I had to go about things. So much so that even when I chose self-publishing, I was embarrassed by it. I was ashamed to be a self-published author. And even now, when I tell people I'm a self-published author, there is this judgment that they have of me, even though I'm like wildly successful, and my self-publishing career has led to, traditional deals. I am a hybrid author now. I have audiobooks that are traditionally published. I have foreign rights I have sold. I just had today I had a publisher reach out to me who wants to work with me, and I'm not certain I want to work with them. So, I put so much faith that I lost faith in myself. And I let other people's judgment prevent me from loving my work. And I would say that they were not right. If I had listened to all those people who told me this is not right for this world, I wouldn't be where I am right now, which is an author making a ton of money. I just bought a new car. I just bought a new luxury vehicle, right? So don't listen if this is where you truly believe you're supposed to be. Because I'm a lot like Alysha, and I'm very spiritual, and I believe in all of that intuition and gut feelings. And I knew this is where I was supposed to be. And I knew all those people were wrong. And I would think over and over, if they just believed in me, if they just gave me a chance. But I had to give myself the chance. So that's the mistake I made. And it was a long one.
I love that. Yeah, I am not spiritual at all, but I totally agree with it can be a really long process to, no matter what path you take, to come to the point where you truly believe in yourself and your work. And I feel like that's something I've just come into as well. But I'm going to focus on, for my mistake, it's not so much as a mistake as it is learning to view the industry in a different way. Because I think when we start out, because it's so exciting when we sign with this agent and when we get the publisher, and it's amazing. They love us. They're like, we're such good friends. They're going to put out our first book. I remember like I went to really early days before my first book had ever come out. I went to New York City and I visited my publisher with my agent. They threw me like a surprise party with like cupcakes and there were speeches, like impromptu speeches. And I was like, oh yes, it's always going to be this way. And we're all like best friends. And I don't know that I really thought it that to that extent, but I think a part of you forgets that these are all business relationships. And so just to remember that you have a business relationship with your agent and your editor and the publishing house, and you might be friends with them in addition to that, but that is not the first part of your relationship. So just to really keep that in mind and to remember that no matter how powerless you might feel, because in traditional publishing, it's really easy to feel like you have no control over what's happening. You are still in charge of your own career. It is not your agent and it's not your publisher. You are the one who guides your own career. And I will say, like, I've always been, since I was a very little kid, I was making 5 and 10 year plans. You know what I mean? So like, I'm always a planner. Like I've always had that sort of outlook for myself. And so that hasn't really changed. But I think the thing that has changed was that I was still putting power in my mind into the hands of these like gatekeepers and thinking, well, I can't do it without them. So you just start to feel very frustrated if you are giving people kind of that power over your career. And just so realizing that no matter what your situation, whether you're traditional or self-published or both, you are ultimately in charge of your career, and you're going to make those deliberate choices and you're going to determine where you go in the future. So that was a big lesson for me. And Alysha, we will leave it with your mistake.
Mine is like really similar to Scarlett's. I'm really glad hers, and then her like whole thing was super powerful. So like, I'm just gonna say samesies. My mistake, and something I still struggle with, is tying my self-worth into the acceptance of my writing, which, I mean, just saying it out loud, like you can hear, like that is wrong. So yeah, taking back my self-worth and understanding just like not everyone's going to like your book, just as you don't like every single book in Barnes Noble. Like not every book is for every single person, and that's okay. And that has no reflection on you as a person. And the more that sinks in and the more I accept that and like am my true person separate from my writing, like, yes, the writing really fulfills me. But then I can break it off and have that like business brain of like, okay, I'll throw it out to these editors. If they say no, like, well, I hope they had a good like couple hours reading it, but if it's not for them, it's not for them. Moving on. Whereas like the first 5 books that I was querying, every single rejection was me crying in the bathroom at work for like an hour. But yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. I always love these episodes when authors talk about their past mistakes because it's so empowering listening to them. Like, oh my gosh, I totally identify with that. So that's what a great topic. And a big thank you to all of my co-hosts for joining me today on Writers Need Help. And we will be back next time to talk about more topics related to writing and the writing business and how to approach them from different perspectives, whether it's traditional or self-publishing. So thanks a lot to everyone who joined us today. Bye, everyone.